Welcome to this month's Understanding ADHD speaker series, hosted by the ADHD Empowerment Meetup community and the nonprofit Children and Adults with ADHD, or CHAD for short, of Greater Los Angeles. Hi everyone, I'm Suzanne Sophos, our Executive Director and today's moderator. As an adult with ADHD and a parent to an incredible son who's sharing that same journey, I want to welcome you all. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat and let us know where you're joining from and how ADHD touches your life. Today's webinar is just a part of our work to educate, support, and advocate for adults and children living with ADHD. We've been hosting this speaker series for almost a decade, bringing experts on the topic of ADHD directly to the community. We also host online peer support groups for adults with ADHD and addiction issues, young women with ADHD, and parents of ADHD children, as well as weekly meetups for body doubling and co-working, and a journaling and meditation group. We also host a private Discord chat community, and you can ask for the link to join that in the chat. You'll find all of our upcoming events listed over in our meetup community. You can visit us at chadla.org for a link to join our meetup community. All of our events are facilitated by our team of volunteers, and all our work is funded by your donations. It's our mission to ensure that ADHD education and peer support are accessible to everyone, regardless of financial constraints. So while there's no fee to attend our events, as a nonprofit, we rely on donations and membership fees. If you resonate with our cause and can contribute, consider making a $10 to $15 donation. You can find the link in the chat, or you can use the QR code on your screen. You can also visit our webpage to learn more about becoming a member of CHAD. Before we introduce our speaker, we'd like to share a brief evidence-based overview of ADHD. It's a lifelong neurobiological condition affecting the brain's executive functions and delaying social emotional development. Executive function skills are crucial for accomplishing any task, and they're impaired in individuals with ADHD. This leads to challenges in self-regulation and self-management. For those of us with ADHD, coordinating our executive functions to provide the right attention, focus, and effort for a task can be highly challenging. Studies show that if ADHD is not diagnosed and well treated, the related challenges can significantly decrease life expectancy by up to 13 years. However, studies also show that life expectancy and outcomes are drastically improved by two things: a proper diagnosis and a lifelong holistic treatment plan. ADHD impacts every area of our lives, so it makes sense that proper treatment should also touch multiple areas of our lives. A holistic treatment plan includes a combination of ADHD education, skills training, medical treatment, and peer support. I want to expand just a bit on the brain's executive functions, which are delayed and impaired in individuals with ADHD. These functions are what help us manage and regulate our planning, decision-making, learning, judgment, emotions, and actions. So if you're doing something, you're using your brain's executive function skills. There are several models that illustrate the brain's executive functions. This particular model that you see on the screen is the work of Dr. Thomas E. Brown. You can see all of the different types of jobs the brain has to manage to get things done. These executive functions come online at different times and in different combinations, depending on what it is we're trying to accomplish. For those of us with ADHD, coordinating our executive functions to provide the right attention, focus, and effort for a task is a process that's impaired. So this leads us to have trouble in many different areas, including those you see listed on the left side of your screen. Executive function development continues until sometime between the ages of 20 and 29, at which time we top out behind our neurotypical peers. Although our executive function is impaired and delayed, it can still be strengthened and developed. You can think of these skills like a muscle. So along with medication or other treatments, receiving executive function coaching, occupational therapy, or creating systems for how you accomplish things can be key ways to strengthen your executive function skills even long after our 20s. It is with great pleasure that I get to introduce you to today's speaker, Robin Finn. Robin is an award-winning writer, teacher, and author of the new book, Heart, Soul, Pen: Find Your Voice on the Page and in Your Life. Her work has appeared in national and international press, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, and ADDitude Magazine. She is the founder of Heart Soul Pen women's writing workshops and Hot Writing about midlife and menopause. Robin has her master's degrees in public health from Columbia University and in spiritual psychology from the University of Santa Monica. Robin's writing journey began when she and her child with ADHD were kicked out of Mommy and Me, prompting her to cast off mom judgment, reclaim her voice as a writer, and encourage other women to do the same. She lives in Los Angeles with her family and is a longtime advocate for children with ADHD and learning differences, as well as a longtime and beloved member of our community. I'm so happy to welcome Robin and all of you to today's event. Just to dive right in, one of my favorite aspects of the book is how you guide us through letting go of limiting beliefs before we embark on the writing. I think that is so powerful. I personally, like, just reading that section, found it like unbelievably powerful because it never occurred to me to do that before. So I think it's pretty revolutionary too. I was wondering if you could explain a little bit. Well, you explain a little bit about these limiting beliefs and how they hold women back, and I'm sure men too, from writing. So I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about that and share some of the most common limiting beliefs that women have and where those originate.
Yes, thank you. What a great question. Well, in the book, like I have to start with parenting because I felt like it was really parenting a kid with ADHD that led me on this journey. And it was through my experience as a mom of a kid who was not neurotypical that I really came face to face with my limiting beliefs. And I talk about, like, the first one as a mother was just that, like, it was my job to fix my kid, and that if you can't fix your kid, you're a bad mother. And those beliefs really brought me to my knees because, as we all know, well, not only can I not fix my kid, but no one is broken. And that was really a very powerful awareness for me. And that process led me into, actually really led me to writing. And when I first started writing, I wrote a lot about parenting a child with ADHD. And then as I got more into writing, I started having a lot of obstacles to getting my voice onto the page. And it was like another opportunity to be like, oh, I think I have limiting beliefs. I think you mentioned I have a background in spiritual psychology. So this was a practice I really learned in spiritual psychology school. What is it that I believe about my voice, about my story, about my worthiness in sharing this, about my skills? So as I really started to write down what my beliefs were, I realized how crazy they were, how I didn't even believe my beliefs, and also how they were in direct opposition to what I wanted to do. And I do laugh about, like, how I didn't even believe my own beliefs, because I talk about how these beliefs come to us sometimes very early in life, and they just get glued onto us. And now, years go by and we're still believing these ideas that don't even make sense for who we are today. For example, I mean, I just, in a different interview, someone brought up the story in the book where I talk about when I was a little girl, I was told, like, I was too loud and I talked too much. And so my desk, we were like in little groups of desks, like a little group of four, a little group of five, and my desk was pulled away alone. And I like to say, as I recount the story, I swear my heart breaks for little Robin, because I just remember the humiliation of my desk being pulled away and me being sitting in the classroom alone. It was just so embarrassing and humiliating. And I really got the message that I'm too loud and I should be quiet so I can be safe and be good and be included. I have to be quiet. And so that belief like had festered for many, many years. And as a writer, when I sat down to ask myself, what do I believe about myself as a writer, as a woman, as a person with a voice, what do I believe about the value? One of the things that kept coming up is I need to be quiet to be good.
Mm,
I need to be quiet. I'm too loud. And I think that that is not uncommon for women. And I will say that people who read advanced copies of the book, of course, these are women who are doing podcasts and doing amazing things like you're doing. So many have said, oh, that happened to me.
yeah.
And that can shut you down. How can I write and let my voice out if I believe my voice isn't safe? I'm going to be punished. So that's an example of like, looking at that belief that I should be quiet to be good and
Yes.
asking myself, well, do I believe this? Well, first of all, I don't even believe that. And then asking myself, is this serving me in my desire to be a writer, to share my experiences? Does this serve me at all? No. Is this uplifting? No. Okay, so there's a real opportunity for me to choose to let that go and what I would say revise it and release it and ask myself, what I really want to say is that my voice is important, that I have something to say, that my words are worthy. So, I can write down these new beliefs before I ever start writing. And it's not magic. It's not like now I believe it, but it's a practice like everything else. You write down the beliefs, you post them on a sticky note and put it on your laptop, take a picture and make it your screensaver, repeat it every day. And it's amazing how you start to have a new belief, and this belief actually supports you. And so, I mean, that's an example of how limiting beliefs can stop you from writing before you even start.
It's so true. I personally resonate with that story as well because the same thing happened to me on my report card, talks too much. I remember I had the most beautiful part of a day when we were singing in class one day, and at the time I was such a big fan of Dolly Parton. I mean, I still am. And we were singing Christmas songs, and I remember thinking in third grade, we'll never forget it, like I'm gonna belt it out. And my teacher tapped on my desk with her ruler, and literally she knew I must have had Dolly like written on stuff, like on my books and stuff. And she's like, you are not Dolly Parton. She's like, get in line. And for years that stuck with me. I thought I can't sing. Am too much for people. And I think that's really, really common, like you said, in women in general. But for those of us in this community, we are often told very many times, you are too much. You are, not conforming to like what you're supposed to conform to be good. And so it can be really challenging.
I want to say like the book has a special audience of women, but for men, it's not very different. It's like early in life, we get these messages that can shut us down. It may not even be the same messages that are often culturally given to women, but we get messages that we're too much and that we should be ashamed, like in your case, that there's some shame around your singing or your voice. And
Yeah.
then if you decide later, I really want to write or have some other form of creative self-expression, you come right up against those beliefs. And in the book, I talk about like, you can write through mud. You can write against those beliefs. You can, but it's not that fun.
Yeah.
It's like, do you want to have judgment or do you want to have flow? Because you can't have both. So I really would submit that if you are willing to really look at some of your beliefs around writing, self-expression, your voice, your worthiness first. And I mean, sometimes you can really laugh because you realize these beliefs are crazy town. Like believing that I have to be small, like I don't even believe that. but this is what is we're holding inside. So if you're willing to take some time and look at your beliefs and literally red pen them and rewrite them and put them around you before you ever start writing, you are so much more likely to have an experience of really flow and feeling
Yeah.
like I'm writing and I feel so good about this experience of being creative, as opposed to that feeling where it's like every word is struggle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I bet with all the workshops that you've hosted and all the work that you've done with women that you've probably heard a lot of stories. And I'm wondering, like, in this area of women that have had trouble finding their voices, and I'm wondering if maybe you could share one of the more memorable ones or something that sticks out for you, for someone who kind of found their voice in while working with you or going through this process.
Well, I mean, one thing that just comes forward to me right now as you're speaking is, because I'm a mother of a kid who has severe ADHD, he has hyperactive type. So was hyperactive. He's still hyperactive, but when he was little, it was like 15 years of power parenting. And so I do have a lot of women who write with me who are mothers of special needs kids. And I'm just always so gripped by their stories because for me personally, they so relate. And I was just listening to a story from a woman who has a child who really struggles. And she wrote about her IEP meeting.
Mm,
Her IEP meetings are just always miserable. She's just in a really difficult school district. She doesn't live in California. And she wrote about how the message she gets from the principal, the teachers, everybody is like they just want her to be quiet and go away.
yes.
And so I do want to say that it's like it has a special place for people who are called to advocate. That
Mm,
this idea that like your voice isn't important is not true. And that is one way in which we really get that message. And I guess the other thing I'd say that really comes to me from parenting is also, I think I dealt with a lot of shame. Like it should be a secret that my son has ADHD. I shouldn't tell anyone. So writing about it and then being published in national outlets is a real opportunity to let go of that and say, you know what? I have nothing to be ashamed of, and neither does my child. And this is a brain issue, and it's really important to raise awareness and really move out of shame. Because I
mm,
think shame is a huge cork to our creative self-expression. It's really hard to write when you're writing about something that you think is shameful.
mm.
And being able to write and share about it is such a huge opportunity for other people to say, that's me. I relate to this. I'm having a similar experience. Thank you so much for saying something I'm feeling. And it really makes you realize it's like shining the light on the dark parts, really makes you realize that not only is it not shameful, it's so important that we get these stories out there.
That is so true. I think that when we share our stories, just doing that helps alleviate the shame. And one of the things that I notice, like with our parent support groups, is that when parents come together and they are attending maybe for the first time, it's often really difficult for them to open up at first. And I think maybe sometimes, especially when they're talking about the challenges of their child or the interplay between their, relationship with their child. And I think it exposes a lot of emotions about their own parenting. So I wonder, like, if I were to ask you if you have insight into like why it's so difficult to open up candidly when writing about our own experiences, like, and sharing intimate details, do you think the shame is the biggest factor in that?
Well, I think it's shame. And I think it's judgment.
Mm,
I joke in the book that it's called heart soul pen and not head soul pen because we're trying to get out of our head and into the heart and soul of our creative self-expression. Because I do believe personally as a writer that the biggest block is judgment. And
mm,
the judgment can be, I should be ashamed of this story, or the judgment can be, I'm not a good enough writer. I'm not a real writer. Often the judgment is like, what I want to write about isn't important, particularly with women, that it's like, I have to climb Mount Everest to write something important. No one wants to hear about the day I walked across the blacktop and all the kids were playing handball and my kid was all alone. But that is not true. That's a really important story. That's a story we can all relate to. But
Yeah.
it's this idea, this judgment that what we have to say isn't important. And that really shuts people down. I feel like I'm here to say, I want to get a flag to say, like, your words are important. That is not true. And when you write things and are willing to share them, you will be amazed at how much people need your words and how writing is connecting. It makes people feel less alone. And I was thinking of another story when you asked about women's voices. I have a student who wrote this piece about online dating, a midlife woman. And, again, the piece she felt really ashamed of, and it was so good. And I said to her, this is the kind of piece that if you wanted for your consideration, could be a personal essay that you could send to the Los Angeles Times. It's funny, it's witty, and honestly, it's so relatable. I'm married, but I have lots of single friends. I hear about online dating from midlife women, and I think that so many women would relate to this. And so it made her go from this dark place of like, I'm afraid to tell this story about how I hate Tinder, to
Mm.
a place of like, wow, I really do have something important to say. It's a commentary on modern dating for midlife women. So, these are ways in which having the courage to write and to share really changes your whole relationship to the issue.
Absolutely. I wonder if that ties in with what you refer to as radical self-expression. And can you talk a little bit about that and why you kind of call that the missing piece?
Yes, because, well, there's a couple of things. If you're a midlife person, so often you spent the last 20 years so busy doing, you don't even know what your self-expression is. I mean, a lot of women wake up in midlife and they're like, I don't even know what to express because I've been so busy getting things done. I haven't really had the opportunity to connect to my voice. So I'd say the first part is like, what do I want to express? And the idea of radical self-expression is really, again, in a lot of the exercises I have in the book, writing to a timer, using these prompts that you have to throw in so you're not busy thinking. It's really giving yourself full permission to allow your voice to come forward onto the page. And that is how you get your best writing. And it's also how you get to really know yourself. That's why I like to say it's finding your voice on the page and in your life. Because in my experience, when you find your voice on the page, you can't help but find it in your life. Suddenly, your voice is coming out all over the place because you hear it, you know it, you connect to it in a way that maybe for many people, they haven't had the opportunity to connect to it in a long, long time.
Absolutely. And once you start that writing and you really you reconnect with your voice, at least that's been my experience. And it informs my conversations with people. It informs how I go about my day, what I think is important, because when we write, like I feel like for me, it really helps me to cultivate and kind of narrow in on what's important to me. It helps me find my values. It helps me figure out how I feel about things. And that's so powerful.
And so often in class, people will write things and say, like, oh, I didn't even know I didn't know that was on my mind. I didn't know that was in my heart. And in the book, I talk about another way people will sometimes judge themselves. They'll say, like, oh, I don't want to write about my chronic illness again. Like I've written about that enough. And I'll just say to them, you will write about it until you're done writing about it.
Mhm.
And regardless of what you want to write about. When you allow your words to emerge, part of it is accepting what those words are. And I talk about in the book, and this still happens to me, that I'll sit down to write about something, and I write about my mother, who I lost in COVID. It's been almost 4 years, and I'll think I don't want to write about my grief, but that is what wants to be written. And I
Mm.
have to give myself my own medicine that, like, I will write about my mother until I'm done writing about my mother. Maybe never, I don't know. But that kind of surrender into allowing what wants to be written is where your best material comes from. And, again, it's like trying not to judge the things that inside want to be written.
That's beautiful. I love that. I love thinking about it as a way of like surrendering to that. I love the way you phrase that. It's interesting when you were talking a little bit before about, doing things a certain way. When it comes to living with ADHD, we talk a lot in our support groups about this idea of systems and rituals kind of surrounding the things we do, because for us, it can help make a practice or like something that we need to do like easier to do. And so I was just wondering, you speak to the importance of rituals and protective spaces in writing. And I wondered if you had any tips for maybe practically like carving out those things.
Yes, I mean, one of the things, if you have any interest at all in writing, it's really important, firstly, to give yourselves privacy. And, I talk about in the book how many women don't have a space for themselves. And it doesn't have to be your own office. It could be your own journal, your own laptop, your own little space at the kitchen desk, or it could be your own office or a card table in the garage. It doesn't matter where it is, but it's a matter of sort of claiming, like, this is my space where I'm going to do my writing, and it's private. And this is my writing journal, and people don't doodle in it. This is for me, for my writing. I talk about, like, if you're working on the family computer where people are ordering paper towels from Amazon, you might not want to pour out your radical self-expression thinking somebody's going to read it. So, taking yourself and your creative needs seriously, moving yourself up on that list of priorities, part of that has to do with creating a space for yourself. And I think that's also important if you're going to have a ritual, like, you have to have a place to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I love what you're saying, and I'm thinking about my son and how when he was little in particular, he would wake up and ask me, like, what's happening today? And he needed to know the schedule. He needed to have that regularity of, like, this is what's happening today. And of course, rituals function so similarly. It's like we make a small ritual for ourselves, and then we're sort of ready for the thing that's going to happen because we've set up a few steps. And I talk about a ritual doesn't have to be hard. It could be 2 or 3 steps. It could be that you read your new beliefs that you wrote down, you sit down, you read your new beliefs. I love creative talismans. So if there's like a special smooth rock or something that you hold in your hand. For me also, and I talk a lot to my students about this who struggle with, like, how do I get started? I love music. Like, my whole book was written to a certain song. And it's like, if there's a song, Brave by Sarah Bareilles, it doesn't matter. If there's a song that gets you going, you listen to your song, you feel all the juices flowing. And that's your ritual. It's like, I read my note, I hold my rock, I listen to my song, I write. So it doesn't have to be hard. It could be lighting a candle. It could be doing a 1-minute peace meditation. It could be lots of things. It's really an intuitive process for you to ask yourself, how can I get ready to write in a way that feels really good to me?
That's powerful. I love that. It's interesting to me, like, we're talking a little bit about these private spaces, but I know that you also host workshops with groups of people. And I imagine that that is a different way of writing, but brings its own its own energy and its own benefits. Can you talk a little bit about writing groups and kind of what that can bring to the practice of writing?
Yes, I mean, when people ask me, like, what's the best tool, was it something that you used on your computer? The best tool that I ever had as a writer is a writing community. That is that I would say I owe all my successes and anything that I ever achieved being in a writing community. I cannot stress myself the importance of it. I think, as a mom of three, I had like my mom friends and like my going out friends, but like having my writer friends was a whole different thing, where like we didn't talk about the kids and we didn't talk about the marriages and we didn't talk about other things that I love talking about with other people. We talked about writing. We talked about creativity. We talked about what are we doing with our work. And it's so exciting to have that group of people that I could reach out to and say, like, I don't know what to write about, or I'm struggling, and have this creative conversation with other people about writing. So I think that was really important. The other thing is, in my workshops, I mean, I think being in a writing workshop is a wonderful experience. I would say that it's a good workshop if you want to write more. If you take a writing workshop and you want to write less, then it's not a good workshop, and get out. And like every writing teacher's got their own thing, but I don't believe in critique in early stages of writing. I only believe in strength-based feedback. And I just want to say, I encourage my students to go off and take other classes, and it's wonderful to have lots of teachers. But if you are in a class or a workshop that makes you feel smaller or makes you feel like you don't want to write, then that is about the workshop, not about you, and leave. Because when you're in a good workshop, you should feel encouraged when you share your work. It is writing in and of itself is a courageous act. Sharing your work is a whole nother level of courage. But in a guided workshop, your instructor should be guiding you to get feedback about what is strong about your piece, what resonates about your piece, what about your piece is curious that people want to know more. So whatever level you are at, if you're a brand new writer and your craft is limited, or you're a professional writer and you write beautifully, it doesn't really matter. Having someone reflect to you what moves them about your work, what they notice and what they're curious about, is so powerful and inspiring. And people leave and they just can't wait to get home and write more.
I
And
love that.
that is how you should feel if you're in a workshop that is, appropriately guided.
I love that. That's beautiful. And I mean, it sounds so powerful, like having that feedback from people and being in that space with other people that are so just, filled with that spirit to like write and share is amazing.
I mean, I would say it's so powerful. I will not overstate to say it's transformational. Being seen, heard, and understood by other people without judgment is transformational. And we just are doing that through writing. Some people are writing for themselves. Some people get a book idea or an essay idea or a blog idea. There's all kinds of different things you might want to do with your writing. But even if the purpose for you is just writing, that is enough. It is enough to just write for the joy and the creation of writing.
Is parenting a high needs kiddo can be a really lonely road. So a lot of us on this journey often feel like nobody understands what we're going through. And, you look at your friends, they're not going through the same things with their kids. And so it really does feel lonely. And one of the things that you talk about is how the practice of writing can alleviate loneliness. And so I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about that, and then maybe kind of wrap us up with some practical advice for getting started on our writing practice.
Well, I get one of the things that I'm referring to when I talk about that is writing in community. The thing about writing is that it's really accessible. You don't need a Peloton. You don't need a lot of these barriers. You just need a pen and paper and someone to guide you. So, I mean, writing is really accessible. And the thing is, when you write in a community with other people, it's not really possible to write with a mask on. You have to take off your mask. And so you are actually really seen. And I think in our modern world where there's so much curation, we're curated on Instagram and Facebook. And so I feel like the authenticity of each other has actually receded, where it's like, I don't know who anybody is. I'm Facebook friends
Mhm.
with it. I just recently read an article about how someone was saying that the average person, they have like three real friends and 500 Facebook friends. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah,
So that is a recipe for loneliness. When you write with other people in community, you show who you are and you get to see who they are. And actually, I feel like as human beings, that is the core of feeling connected, is to actually just be able to show yourself and be seen and see other people. And so writing is a form of that. And I would say that pretty much every single class I've ever taught or workshop, when people leave, they love each other and they're best friends. And some of these groups stay together for years, but it's just not possible to write with other people and not connect. It's just a connection. And I think we're so lonely because we need connection.
absolutely.
It's a problem that we've taken away all the connectedness. And so writing in community is a really easy, fun way to connect to other people. And then you also get this wonderful side effect, which is that you have a piece of material that you might want to do something with. You have this wonderful thing you created that might be a poem or an essay. So it's like a twofold. You get the relationships and the connection, and you also get a piece of writing that you just made. People will feel less alone. They will be amazed at how connected they feel to other people by hearing their words.
That's beautiful. And I think you really hit it when you talk about unmasking, because, that's something that a lot of us that are neurodiverse have learned to do so that we can get along. And if we can come and let the mask down and be vulnerable with other people, the way that you're talking about, it is so powerful. Like I absolutely see how connections might come from like your workshop. We see it in our peer support groups too. It's like the moment people are able to be vulnerable and let down the guard of, oh, I have to be perfect, or, I have to come across like I'm perfect. The connection is so much more profound.
So much more. And I think we are at our nature compassionate beings, but we need to have the opportunity to share compassion with each other. The only way we can do that is if we're willing to share our truth. If everybody's perfect, then okay, then you sort of feel alone in your imperfection. But
Exactly.
we're all imperfect. It's like it actually also creates a kind of a lightness, because even though there can be some really heavy material, there's also a lot of we're laughing at ourselves and experiencing all these parts of being a human being together. I know for me with my son, I always say like humor saved me. I mean, there were so many uh shit shows, excuse me, going on throughout the raising. I can't, is story after story. And like I used to say, if I don't laugh, I'd cry. And
Yeah.
is that I feel that I really gave that to my son,
Mm.
who also can laugh at himself, because it's like, we're just all doing the best we can. And it's so we do try to cultivate a sense of humor and be able to not hold it too seriously, because it becomes too much.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Robin, your book is beautiful. And it's beautiful for parents of high need kiddos, but it's beautiful for anybody that's looking for a way to connect with themselves and really know themselves better and kind of move forward with a lighter step in this world. So I really am excited for people to get it. And it's available for pre-order now, right? And it is available everywhere on May 14th.
It's available everywhere on May 14th, and you can pre-order it from any of your favorite book ordering sites now. The things I want to say is it's always been clear to my family that I am sharing my experience as a parent. as a mother. I couldn't share my kids' experience even if I tried. It's not my experience. I'm sharing my experience as a mother. With my own son, as he got older, anytime I would write anything about him, first of all, I never used his name, although and we happen to have different last names. So there was some anonymity, but I always offered him the opportunity to read the article first. And if he wanted to edit it or didn't want me to write something, then that came first. I mean, I do think when you're like a spouse or child of a writer, it's sort of like it's all grist for the mill. But of course, with my children, I have always offered them, if they're in my piece, to read it. And if they have any notes, that comes first to me, is maintaining their privacy and their feelings. But to be honest, my son always would say to me, if you're going to help somebody, write it. He felt very powerfully about his own sense of being felt to be ashamed, and he didn't like it. And I think he appreciated, so it didn't bother him, but not every kid will feel that way. And I do feel as a writer that I certainly deferred to him if it was something that he was featured in. But, of course, my pieces are about what it was like for me. What it was like when I walked across the blacktop and I saw my son in the distance sitting alone. And then it's all about my thoughts and how I felt, and the other parents, how they acted to me. So of course it was still about him in a way, but I was sharing my experience, and I guess I was lucky that I have family who supported that. But I would say to anyone who wanted to write about a kid that you might want to consider asking them to read it first and being sure you have their permission, because you certainly wouldn't want to violate your child's privacy in your own writing.
That's a really good point. I think, in this day and age of social media too, like I know that regardless of the advocacy work that I do, at the end of the day, I'm doing it to make the world a better place for my son. So I always, talk to him first about what I put out there about our family story. And he's very much like your son. He's like a little advocate. And so he's like, yeah, tell people what it's like. So I'm blessed in that way as well, but absolutely honoring, the agency of our kiddos with regard to their stories is an important point. Thanks so much for attending. For more information, visit www.chadla.org.